Alright, so what's going on, guys? My name is Curtis JK, and I'm here with MV Parrot.
Hello.
So, this is going to be two back-to-back races of Battle for Bikini Bottom. So we're gonna have both any percent and NG plus. This first race is going to be any percent between Tower and Jackalaca. So I'll count them down in the Discord, and they should be starting soon.
Now that they're here, should we explain what the two categories are?
Yeah, so yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the categories in this game, any percent is basically just beat the game as fast as possible without using the in-game cheat codes. And then NG Plus is the same thing, except you're allowed to use cheat codes to spawn in the two power-ups from beating the boss fights right from the start of the run. So we're definitely going to be seeing some interesting gameplay across both of the runs. They're both really different runs compared to each other. So we should see some pretty exciting stuff here. So if you're unfamiliar with the basic objective of this game, basically the goal of the game is that you need to break into the Chum Bucket lab and shut down a machine that Plankton made that's spawning a bunch of robots to terrorize Bikini Bottom. And the door, to get into the door, you need 75 golden spatulas, which are the equivalent of like stars in a Mario game. So you're going to be seeing some interesting strats to collect the fastest 75 spatulas in the game to complete the game.
And the fun thing about any percent is that it actually showcases a few of the harder tricks in the game, so should be some interesting content for you guys.
So the glitch that you're seeing them do here, where they walk into the taxi pad, is basically a glitch that disables the game's out of bounds detection and lets them walk into areas that they're not supposed to be able to. Like this pit that's coming up here. So normally they would jump in. You can try to jump into this pit normally, and the hand, which is the out of bounds detection, would just grab you and take you away. But the glitch with the taxi pad that they did allows them to jump into the pit without worrying about that. And
Yeah,
up
the,
here,
the
you're going
hand
to
being
be seeing
disabled is a big part of why most of the tricks and spatulas in this game are able to be grabbed in the way they're grabbed.
Yeah, exactly. The run would be way more difficult and a lot different if we didn't have access to that. And the trick that they're coming up here is called Robo Sandy Skip, and it's actually one of the hardest tricks in this category. Looks like Tower missed it. Looks like they both missed it. So this trick is like the notorious gatekeeper for getting runs in this category. The basic idea is that there's huge invisible walls blockading you from just skipping around to the second hub area, and Jack got it. Good job for Jack. And the idea is that you want to jump under the invisible wall and get a ledge grab there, and that allows you to access this second hub area of Bikini Bottom earlier than you're normally able to, and get some pretty fast spatulas earlier in the game.
Yeah, it's essentially the equivalent to Wind Waker barrier skip, just in Battle for Bikini Bottom, but by doing this trick, it allows you to go to the dream segment early, and save downtown for later in the game, which speeds up the game pretty significantly.
Looks like they've both gotten Robo Sandy Skip, and Jack is on to Roll Buck, which is a similar trick in that it allows you to skip straight away to the third hub area, which is where we're going to be seeing a lot of those fast early game spatulas. So yeah, these two tricks back to back at the start of any percent is a lot of what makes it really difficult to get runs. And unfortunate miss from Tower.
Yeah, both these tricks are pretty difficult tricks. They're gonna make them look a little bit easier than they actually are, but they have missed them a few times. So you could tell, just based off that they're not the easiest tricks in the world to get.
And now you're seeing now that Jack got that spatula that's inside of the chum bucket, normally we have to warp out, which is just the fastest way to go to where we're going next, which is SpongeBob's dream. But you're seeing Jack go back to Jellyfish Fields here for some fast spatulas that we need in the early game. You can technically do this like in your first trip to Jellyfish Fields, but most people that run any percent generally elect to save this for after doing the 2 tricks to skip the hub areas in Bikini Bottom, because it's kind of painful to get past Jellyfish Fields here and then just reset to those tricks. So in a category like any percent, it's definitely more worth it to save this for after the Bikini Bottom skips.
The trick Jack is working on right now is what we call hammer skip. Basically, there's a few methods of doing it, but the way Jack is doing it is to get a double jump off of a damage frame to get to the top and actually skip having to go all the way around to get up there. But there's also an alternate method you can do where you can bash off the head of the robot to unlock the checkpoint trigger up there, so you'll spawn up there after you die.
Yeah, so specifically how those jumps out of damage work is that when SpongeBob does his damage animation, there's 1 frame after it ends where the game detects SpongeBob as still on the ground, and it lets you input any grounded move that you want on that frame, such as a bash or a bowl, which is useless, or your single jump, your first grounded jump. So a lot of the top runners abuse this to get some frame perfect tricks throughout the run. And the trick that you saw Jack do with the damage boost into the bash to get to Patrick is actually not frame perfect with the setup most people try to do. So basically, when you like slide across the ground while you're doing a damage boost, the game doesn't really know what to do with detecting you as on the ground or in the air, so you get more frames than you're normally supposed to of being detected as on the ground. So it makes those frame perfect double jumps and bashes and stuff like that not actually frame perfect. You actually get, I think it's closer to like 5 or 6 frames to do them. So they're still not as easy as they might appear at first, but definitely a lot more lenient than 1 frame to input the moves.
Yeah, definitely a lot more forgiving for a quote-unquote 1 frame. Give a little bit of leniency with it.
So Tower caught up a little bit from Jack's mishaps with Hammer Skip, but he's still a decent way behind. But this is Battle for Bikini Bottom. Anything can happen throughout the run to swing the lead. So the trick that Jack is doing right here is called, we like to call it Sandy Nut, or officially Sandy's Dream Skip. The basic idea of it is that there's an invisible checkpoint on top of that acorn. So the goal with jumping under the acorn in that little purplish area is that you want to unlock the checkpoint that's under there, and there's a pretty specific spot that you can do that in, but it's not really that difficult to do if you know where it is. And then, since the hand is disabled, you can't just fall into the void to die to activate the checkpoint. You have to glide over the manure truck and die that way. And the trick actually wouldn't be possible if we had the hand still activated, because the game wouldn't let you go underneath the acorn like that. Because there's actually triggers there to get you grabbed by the hand if you go under there normally. And the trick that you saw Jack do to damage boosts, and the trick we're about to see Tower do to damage boost across the entire dream segment, is another one of those tricks where we abuse sliding off a ledge to get more grounded frames to do those moves, the grounded moves. That trick's called Oil Skip, and it's a pretty notoriously hard trick for like mid-level players to get down, but once you've got it, you pretty much got it down.
And you'll see a few of those damage boosting to get ground frame tricks throughout the run.
Yeah, there's a lot of those tricks in like the early game and the mid game portion of the run in any percent.
changes to where you don't really need those when you get the power up because some fun stuff comes into play, but we'll explain that when it actually happens. Don't want to ruin the surprise.
So throughout the run, you're gonna see the runners kind of enter these taxi pads in a really weird looking way, but the reason that you see them do that is because if you just approach the taxi pads normally, there's normally a cutscene of the spatula and like the little count in front of it that tells you how many you need to enter the level. There's a cutscene of that going down and the game kind of telling you, hey, you unlocked this area. But if you approach the taxi pad in a kind of weird way where you're standing inside the loading zone trigger for the area, you can press A lot faster than you're normally supposed to be able to, and you can just enter the level and skip the cutscene. And the trick that Jack is attempting right now is called Sponge Glide. It's one of the most major tricks in the game, I would say. It allows you to basically glide over this island and do one of those slide off damage boost tricks to get over to the Goo Lagoon Pier way earlier than you're normally supposed to be able to. Ooh, he almost died doing that. That was...
Yeah, that was a bit sketchy getting over the end.
The second sponge glide off of the second tower is supposed to be a lot easier than the first one, but people notoriously have a little bit more trouble with that one than the first one that you saw them do.
Yeah, and there's also a chance on that one you can get somewhat soft locked and get stuck on the pole up there and not actually go down and glide over, and you just have to reload at that point.
There's a lot that can go wrong on Goo Lagoon Beach, make you lose a lot of time. So on the Goo Lagoon Pier, there's normally supposed to be a cutscene when you destroy the tent that has that robot inside of it, but the trick that you saw them do with throwing a tiki into the tent and then drowning during the cutscene, it basically just skips the cutscene. It's a pretty easy cutscene skip. It saves a lot more time than you would think, actually.
Yeah, that is a pretty long cutscene. But anytime you die in the middle of a cutscene trigger, it basically skips the cutscene, saving a little bit of time here and there.
Another kind of subtle cutscene skip that you might not have even known that they were doing is when they were doing the Patrick's Dilemma mission with the spatula where they switched to Patrick in Jellyfish Fields. There's a cutscene skip before you approach the damage boost there as well that not many people pick up on unless you tell them, where you like jump over the goo and access the cutscene trigger at the same time, so you just drown as it's starting. There's a lot of neat tricks like that in this game to skip long animations and cutscenes. Here we have Jack entering the Poseidon right now. So this is the first major boss fight in this game. So to people that don't run this game, or at least not at a top level, this boss fight looks pretty insignificant and slow and boring. But there's a lot of really subtle manipulations going on in this fight to optimize it and to make sure we get through it as fast as possible. Because you can definitely lose like a lot of time in this boss fight if you're not going for these manips or doing them well at all. It's taken a lot of doing runs and grinding out these manips through doing attempts to get to where they are.
What Jack is doing right now is probably the most important manipulation in this fight. You can angle yourself appropriately as Sandy is entering the second part of what she does against Patrick, to where you can manipulate where she lands on the ropes, so you can make those ropes a little bit quicker and completely avoid having to jump over her spring boots instead.
Yeah, the other important thing about these manipulations as Patrick is that you want her to land like on the edge of that little gray circle in the middle of the arena, because when you do the like belly flop slam to knock her head off, the head actually like moves towards the center of the arena, wherever that happens to be, in like relevant to where Robo Sandy is. So you want her to kind of be off center from that circle to be able to tell where the head's gonna go.
The old clothesline move.
There's a lot of subtle things in boss fights like these that people that don't run this game might not pick up on, but are really important to getting optimized times in this game.
Wow, I've never
Yeah,
seen
aside from
such
those,
an
the boss fights are pretty
electrifying
easy.
match.
It's just the subtle manipulations that help you save time.
So after this boss fight is over, we're going to be seeing in Goo Lagoon probably the most impactful glitch that came in 2018, which is called Ski Ball Abuse, or SBA. And it's part of the reason why we saved like pretty much all of Goo Lagoon here, except for that tent part at the start for after Robo Sandy. And we have to save it for after Robo Sandy because beating Robo Sandy gives us the Bubble Bowl power up, which is necessary to do the glitch. But yeah, we can explain that a little more when they get there. The SBA is a really impactful trick that really rerouted the main any percent in pretty much every single category a lot, but it also brought up some controversies. I can't talk. In the last year or so about the leaderboard and what should be the main category in this game.
Yeah, SBA really changed the entire scape of the game and how it's run. It cuts out a lot of the slower spatulas, but we'll explain why when it gets there. But definitely one of the more impactful tricks discovered in this game.
So Jack is entering Tree Dome now, which is a quick little combat portion of the game. And then after that, he's going to be using the menu system to warp down to Goo Lagoon, which is also another really cool thing about runs of this game, is that backtracking actually isn't really that long and slow in the grand scheme of things, because the menu system in this game just lets you warp back to other areas pretty much within a few seconds of a loading screen. And here he just menus down, picks the spatula he wants, and then he appears at the level again to do what he needs to do. So here on Clear the Bumper Boats, it's a pretty RNG dependent area of the game, just like Tree Dome is and most of the other combat sections in the game are. But generally good runners are able to react to the RNG that they get and lose minimal time from bad RNG.
I feel like Jack is coming up on the beginning of the setup for SBA. And the premise behind this is you're going to get on top of this little pole here and slide down while also attempting to grab so you can pick up one of those stone tikis to start the setup.
Yeah, picking up that first stone tiki is just another way of using grounded frames to be able to use grounded moves when you're not supposed to be able to pick up that tiki on that stack. So the basic idea of SBA is that these stone tikis aren't really coded in the best way when interacting with things like the bubble bowls. So the skee ball machine, when you bowl into it, it basically makes a bubble bowl a solid object that won't break until you throw another one in there. And so we're going to abuse this by getting a bubble bowl stuck between two of these stone tikis and basically abusing the fact that we can get it stuck on one of these triggers that gives us shiny objects from the skee ball machine. And like I said with the stone tikis, they're not really coded the best way, so they just kind of make the bubble bowl go nuts when it gets stuck between those tikis.
It gets stuck and it constantly triggers the point value for the 30 hole on the skee ball game.
And this trick has gone through a lot of development and a lot of different setups throughout the past year or so.
It's one of those tricks that is just still constantly evolving at this point.
Yeah, so at maximum speed, the ball actually moves in and out of the points trigger every other frame. So you can get, since this is a 60 FPS game, you can get at maximum like 300 shiny objects a second, which is insanely fast.
The point of actually doing SBA is to grind out around, what is it in any percent, about 39,000?
That's for NG plus. In any percent, we need a bit more than that, about 42, 43,000.
But yeah, basically doing SBA allows you to farm shinies so you can get the Mr. Krabs spatulas for paying him, and cutting out a lot of slower spatulas in the game.
Yeah, exactly, because Mr. Krabs can give you 8 spatulas in total in a single file. So the idea of buying all the spatulas from Mr. Krabs is that like this whole setup and everything of SBA basically adds like about a minute and a half or so onto Goo Lagoon Pier, and it gives you the 8 crab spatulas, and it also gives you all these objectives that you're seeing them do while this is happening. Basically, like yeah, all these objectives they're doing in the middle of this are like free spatulas and socks essentially. So yeah, this trick is used to route out a lot of the slower pace parts of the game and a lot of the slower spatulas that we would otherwise have to do. You see Jack here back in SpongeBob's dream going for a trick called Forbidden Skip. Trick, if you're curious as to why they delayed doing that trick instead of just doing it on their first visit to Dream, is because it actually requires the Bubble Bowl to do fast. There's a setup for it that doesn't use the Bubble Bowl, but it's faster to just delay doing it and to come back once you have the Bubble Bowl.
The way it works is you actually gain forward momentum when using a Bubble Bowl. So you use it to get the forward momentum while boosting into the spikes to get some extra momentum, and then damage boost jump over to where the spatula is at.
Yeah, it's a really cool looking trick, but in reality it basically just skips like this little walking segment of walking across like the wooden plank section to get to where the spatula is. But it does save a decent chunk of time, so it's pretty worth going for at these guys' skill level. Now, once they buy all of the spatulas from Mr. Krabs, they're going to be entering Murmelair, which is one of the more slower paced parts of the early game, but it does have some pretty neat segments that you can appreciate if you played this game casually.
Murmelair is one of those segments where there's some like sneakily difficult stuff to do.
Yeah, it can either be a really easy segment or a pretty difficult segment at top level. There's a trick that's been developed kind of recently called Prawn Early, which is a trick to basically clip outside of the map and do prawn in the mid game, which, like, if you're just comparing like doing the trick in the late game, it's about the same speed as doing it in late game, but the beauty of doing it in early game is that you get to put something else in the late game, another spatula, and save time by doing it later with the cruise boosting exploit. But yeah, it's a pretty difficult trick to do optimally, and I'm not sure if either of these guys are going to be going for it. And as you see with this clam here next to Mermaid Man, part of the beauty of SBA as well is that you can use the shiny objects you get from that to basically pay all these toll gates for free without really wasting a ton of time, as pretty much just a side effect of doing it to get all 8 crab spatulas really fast. And if you were ever confused about this Towers of Power puzzle as a kid, yes, that is all you have to do to beat that puzzle. It's just hit every single...
Slam the buttons in order.
It doesn't even have to be in order. You just hit every single button. Like, there were old ways that we used to do that using the melon, where we hit the buttons in kind of a weird order, but it's basically the same effect as what you saw Jack do. We just hit all of them in a row. Ooh, and it looks like we're seeing Prawn Early from Jack. So the idea behind this trick is that you have to get wedged in this little corner to get clipped out of the map. And then, so the devs were really cool when they made this game, and they left in a debug trigger to basically end this boss fight instantly once you touch it. But they put it outside of the map thinking that nobody would ever be able to reach it. But, you know, we're speedrunners. We find a way to do things. So Jack setting up for it. So you got to do a pretty precise bowl off of the little pointed wedge he was facing. And I don't think it's pixel perfect, but it's pretty precise. You have to bowl off this ledge in such a way that the game tries to give you some of that bowling acceleration speed as you're walking off of it. And while at the same time preserving both of your grounded jumps to have enough distance to reach the trigger, which is invisible. Like, you wouldn't even know it's there unless you looked at like the code of the game. Looks like Tower had a better prawn early than Jack did, but Jack is still ahead by a little bit.
Glad both of them got that. That's a fun trick to showcase.
Yeah, that's another one of those early game run killers. Like, pretty much all of the hardest stuff in this category is in the early game. Which is not to discount the level of skill it takes to perform well in late game, but there's
so
a
many
lot
hard
of
tricks
difficult
stacked
stuff.
into the early and mid game that can really kill a run.
So here's security tunnel. It tends to be either a really easy segment or you end up losing a ton of time here. Because you can do some precise jumps off of ledges and some damage boosts to not even have to enter a single one of the tunnels. Tower was pretty close to death there on security tunnel, but
Yeah.
he made it happen.
You'll notice both of them skipped the rolling ballroom puzzle because they are going to opt to do that late game with a nice fun trick.
Yeah, there's a clip that was discovered, I think, towards the start of 2018 or like the end of 2017 that just allows you to clip inside of the case there with the spatula and skip doing the entire puzzle. But we need access to the power-up from the other major boss fight, which is the cruise bubble, which you get from beating RoboPatrick. We need that to do the trick, so they're going to be putting that off towards doing that in late game.
The trick Jack is doing right now is called Bathroom Boost. It's another one of those getting the grounded frame so you can bash over and get a little more distance to completely skip rock bottom and get the spatula early.
There was an old setup for that trick that was frame perfect, but luckily for everyone's sanity, there was a non-frame perfect version found. And coming up here is another one of those tricks, which is called Sleepy Skip. It's another one of these tricks where you slide off a ledge and get more grounded frames. Sleepy Skip is another one of those tricks that notoriously gives a bunch of people trouble at like the mid to high level. And it's all about the setup. These sliding off a ledge and getting more grounded frames, the tricks that involve doing that, they're all about the setup. And you need to have a good setup going into doing those tricks.
That is the whole point of Rock Bottom 1. That is literally all you do. Just 2 of those sliding tricks to get a couple spatulas, and you save the rest for late game.
Exactly. So now they're entering Sand Mountain. They could have chosen to done Sand Mountain or Rock Bottom in either order, but the reason that we do Rock Bottom first is because you notice that the first time they bowl the button that spawns the floating blocks, it plays like a little cutscene that shows you the blocks and shows you the spatula on top of Shady Shoals. And that really puts off the block cycle and makes it worse if you're going on top of Shady Shoals right away. So they just go into Rock Bottom first to eat the cutscene and then do Shady Shoals on the way to Sand Mountain after doing rock bottom. Now Jack, using the warp system, going back to Krusty Krab for the spatula that you get from clearing it. And if you want to show somebody a run of this game, you can show them the clip, show them like a video clip of somebody entering Industrial Park this way. And that should raise a lot of questions about the speedrun of this game.
Yikes! Looks like SpongeBob's in for a rough ride.
Industrial is another one of those boss fights where it's pretty much solely determined on manipulations.
Great barrier
There are a few in
reef.
both of them that really make a difference as far as time goes.
This first phase isn't really that important or interesting. It's basically just reacting to where he lands. But the second and third phase is where like all of the interesting stuff happens in this boss fight.
First phase, really just avoid the goo and you're good.
Do-si-do and around you go.
Both of them now in Industrial
The
Park
robot
doing the
better
boss fight.
change tactics and
So,
fast.
not too much disparity between them.
Yeah, it's pretty close between them, about one hit apart on Robopat. So one of my favorite things about being in this community and running the game is the routing process for the different categories. Because there's a lot of ways that you can play this game at a lot of skill levels, and routing it the best to be able to get like all the quickest stuff done whenever it's the quickest to do so is so interesting to me. I love that about this game. One of
Yeah,
the
it's
most
great.
important factors in any percent in particular is getting to 40 spatulas as quickly as possible to get into RoboPatrick as soon as you can. Because doing this allows you to get the cruise bubble unlocked, like I said earlier, and it allows you to do the cruise boosting exploit throughout the entirety of late game. So the routing to be able to get 40 spatulas as quickly as possible and balancing like which spatulas are fastest to do with cruise boosting, which ones you want to save for later in the game, what sacrifices on time saved versus time lost you need to make to get into Industrial Park as quickly as possible. Like, it's some of the most interesting stuff to me about the routing in this game.
The great thing about the routing in this game is that, dependent on skill level, you can route the game completely optimal for what you're able to do. There's so many options you can interchange to make this game a better experience for what level you're at with it, and I love that about it.
Exactly, like there's always going to be like an optimal route, but depending on your skill level, you can pick and choose the tricks that you want to do, the spatulas that you want to do, when you want to do those spatulas, what tricks you want to do to get those spatulas. It's a lot of this game and the routing that you choose to do is up to preference, which is a great thing about this game.
Yeah, because with almost every spatula, there's several ways you can do it, and you can kind of just perfect it to how you find it the easiest to be done, and I love that about this game.
So phase 3 is where all the interesting stuff happens in Industrial Park. So you're gonna see them stand in really specific spots on these conveyor belts, and this is basically to manipulate RoboPatrick to land in pretty ideal placements so that you can hit him as soon as possible and get him spinning again as soon as possible.
By kind of lodging yourself into the corners of these conveyor belts before he starts doing his spin attack, it's actually going to help decide where he lands, and it can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but if you do it correctly, he's always going to land by this front platform here, which is going to be the easiest to do your bubble bowl so you can hit him and get on with the next segment.
Yeah, exactly. You can not lose a ton of time here. Basically, just if you predict where he's going to land and stand in an appropriate spot. But the whole thing about these manips is that if you mispredict and he lands in a spot you weren't expecting, then you're going to be losing a bunch of time. Because normally most runners expect them to land in the front here and kind of position themselves in a way to hit him as soon as he lands. But if he decides to land in the back instead, if you mess up the manips, then it's gonna lose a bunch of time. So now in the late game, you're gonna be seeing the cruise boosting exploit that we've been talking about the whole time. So cruise boosting is basically a trick where you do frame perfect input with the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame, and then you do it again, like while holding to the left or right. So cruise boosting allows you to stack some speed from bowling on top of your walking speed, because the cruise bubble cuts off the bowling animation and makes it so that you never stop moving forwards. So we're going to be abusing that for the rest of the run. Basically, it's a really fast movement option to have. It makes a lot of stuff really, really fast.
Trick
Now
Jack is working on right now is actually called Art Skip. It allows you. There's actually a trigger for the Return the Museum Art spatula under Mrs. Puff, and by lag clipping under it, you can completely skip having to actually get the art, which saves a good bit of time.
Yeah, so once again, the devs are really cool and left in another of these debug triggers that we can just abuse and exploit. And it's the trigger for the museum's art. Like, people have asked if there's triggers like that for like any of the other collectibles, like the wheels in downtown, or like, yeah, basically like any of the other collectibles in any of these main areas. But yeah, the art is the only one where they left a trigger like that. We've had people look at the code to determine that. And Tower's actually going for a bit of an outdated route.
But the trick
So
is
this
cool,
trick that he,
so I'm glad we get to see it.
yeah, he got it first try, which means that he's not going to be even losing that much time off of the optimal route. So that trick, basically, if you saw what Jack did in Ballroom Clip before going to Rock Bottom, the bowling off of a ledge that he did to like clip out of the map is called an elbow. And you do the same input as a cruise boost. You use the bubble bowl and cruise bubble in the same frame. But because you're not standing on solid ground, the game inputs a bowl instead, and the cruise bubble doesn't come out. But the cruise bubble, if you're not familiar, gives you some invincibility frames at the startup. So, and like some frames where collision just does not apply to you. So here, you're going to see it again with Ballroom Clip on Tower's side. But you have one frame where you don't have collision there. So if you have enough speed to get from like one side of a wall to the other on that frame, then you can just clip through things. And that gets abused a lot in this game.
The way that
So
trick
the
works on
reason,
Sand Mountain is you get the extra displacement from sliding off the wall there to clip through it. So you actually have the speed to make it to the end of that time challenge instead of actually having to go down the slide.
yeah, exactly. That trick, Larry Time Challenge Skip, is heavily dependent on how you set it up and the angle you're facing and the angle in which you walk off that ledge.
That's one
With
of the
some
harder tricks in the
setups,
game, but Tower made it look
yeah,
very easy.
with some setups, there's only one frame where the bowl will give you enough speed to reach the bottom. With some other setups, we believe it to be 2 frames with certain setups. But the tricks, I don't think entirely figured out for the best setup to be used RTA. But yeah, it's definitely a trick that you can get semi-consistent with practice. So Jack is going to be doing Goo Lagoon 2, or sorry, Goo Lagoon 3. There's actually 3 trips to Goo Lagoon in the story. And so the 2 spatulas that you're going to see him get here are actually what we routed in to replace the trick on the slide in Sand Mountain that you saw Tower do. Because as it turns out, optimally, it's actually about a second or 2 faster to do these 2 spatulas instead of doing the 2 that you get in the slide from doing the time challenge. Ooh, and Jack missing some cruise boost here. So cruise boosting, as you can probably expect from the fact that it's frame perfect, is a really difficult trick to do consistently. So these kids here with the balloons are actually on they're on a cycle as soon as you load in the level, either from a reload in the menu or from a death. So the idea of trying to do this spatula fast is that you have to get a cruise boost first try to have the kids be on a fast cycle so you can hit them all really quickly. And unfortunately, the first time Jack attempted it, he missed some cruise boosts, so he was off cycle. And Tower here showing off how insanely overpowered cruise boosting movement is, and how cool it is to do and to watch be done. The museum gets broken a whole lot when you have cruise boosting.
Pretty clean kid second time around from Jack there, though. It's really one of those. It's super cycle based and movement based, so it's a lot harder than it actually looks.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people can get a cruise boost first try. You also have to be able to do the movement consistently and to be able to hit all those kids when you're on cycle. Oh, that's unfortunate for Tower. So that cruise boost spot that he chose to use is pretty risky, and I don't even think it saves time anymore, because there's an RCB or a reverse cruise boost you can do off the castle here. And I'm pretty sure it's faster than using like the little dock that Tower did the first time, but I don't know. It's kind of dependent on preference, once again, what strats you're comfortable with. So Jack is here in downtown. So this level, again, this level gets broken a lot by cruise boosting, just like the museum does. So
Exactly why we save it for late game.
yeah, this level is a lot slower if we do it without having cruise boosting. But it is a lot more interesting for people to watch, generally, because there's a lot of crazy damage boosts and one-frame jumps to get to the rooftops fast if you don't have cruise boosting. See, you actually see, like, not a whole lot of downtown in any percent anymore. Like, this level's been cut down a lot by the introduction of, like, new strats and faster spatulas. Yeah, this platforming across the rooftops is pretty insane.
And that jump Jack just did's actually a pretty tight jump.
Yeah, if you noticed, he spun. He did a. He spun. He did a spin before he jumped off the ledge. Uh, the point of that is that when you land on the ground, like if you jump while you have a cruise boost and then land on the ground, the game doesn't reset your gravity falling speed when you have a cruise boost. So if you just walk off that ledge without resetting your downward momentum, then you're gonna like fall off a bit before you actually attempt to do the jump. So the purpose of the spin is that doing a grounded move will reset your downwards momentum. So it's pretty important to doing that big jump towards the end of rooftops.
You can make it without resetting downward momentum, but it is significantly harder, and there's no point in not doing the spin.
Yeah, it doesn't even lose time to do the spin pretty much. Ooh, Tower's doing a bit of a safe strat for that jump though. He bashed off the ledge instead of just doing his normal, doing like the normal double jumps, which loses about a second, but it's a lot safer than just jumping out like that.
Another thing about cruise boosting that we didn't mention is that with the cruise boost movement, it allows you to use those stationary moves like your bash and your slam and actually move and reposition yourself while in them instead of it just being completely stationary.
So it's gonna look for a little bit that Tower caught up here, but that's because Jack did the spatula that's inside the lighthouse in downtown. And the reason that he did that is because there's a trick coming up in Jellyfish Fields here after they get out of the caves that Tower, I'm pretty sure, is going to be doing, which is why he skipped the lighthouse, I assume. It's called Drain the Lake clip, and it's another one of those lag clips like the one that we saw at the start of the second rock bottom trip. So Drain the Lake is normally supposed to be like this combat mission with Patrick where you destroy all the fountains and all the goo goes away in the lake and you can collect the spatula. But if you clip under the ground using a ladder, clip, you can collect that spatula early without having to do the challenge. It's a pretty fast spatula in basically every category that completes the game like this.
But it is also probably the hardest lag clip to do in the game.
The hardest one that's viable in most of the main categories, probably. There are some categories that feature some other ones. I think just one category. Oh, Tower's not going to be doing it? Okay. I'm not entirely sure what spatula he'd have to do to replace that. But, yeah. If he wasn't doing Drain the Lake clip, he would have done Lighthouse, most likely, because that only loses about, like, 15 seconds or so.
I'm not sure what he's gonna be going for. I was fully expecting him to do Drain the Lake clip there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what other options there are at this point.
You know, I'm trying to think.
Maybe he just forgot the route, or maybe he does his own thing? I don't know.
Huh.
But they're even. Wait, they're even on spatula counts. I'm confused. Oh, I guess Tower
Did I miss something
did.
here?
Tower did over the moat. Actually, that makes sense. Yeah, the old routes didn't do over the moat. When they skipped the lighthouse, I guess I got confused from that. But they're even on
Yeah, that makes
spatula
sense now.
counts. That actually confuses me a lot. I'm not sure what spatula Tower does that Jack doesn't do. I guess he does the Larry time challenge skip, which is 2 extra spatulas, but I'm not sure because Jack gets Save the Children, but he has to get another spatula to make up for that, I guess. He had to at some point, but I'm not entirely sure what he did. But either way, they're really close now. The gap kind of got closed coming out of downtown because Jack had to detour for that extra spatula. So Kelp Forest, it can either be like the easiest level in any category, or it can be like a pretty difficult level to do optimally. Alright, let's see. Yeah, cruise boosting saving literally minutes by letting you just enter the kelp vines from the backside here. And it's pretty similar to what you saw them do in Goo Lagoon at the start of the run, except a lot easier looking and a lot less impressive looking. It's gonna allow them to play pretty much the entire level in the reverse order here from what's intended.
Also, one thing I'd like to point out, Jack actually did start a few seconds after Tower, and looking at their timers, they're actually like dead even.
Yeah, they're pretty much exactly even. Looking at the timers. The stream can't see that, but they are pretty much even because of stream delay.
So yeah, pretty tight race we have here.
So I wonder if either of these guys are gonna go for Swamp Cage clip. Okay, it looks like Tower will not be doing it, and neither is Jack. All right. So there's another lag clip you can do here in the kelp swamps to clip inside of the cage here with the spatula, and it saves like 5 to 10 seconds optimally. So I don't really blame them for not going for it.
It's a pretty easy clip to miss, and if you miss it, you're not saving any time. So.
Ooh, but Jack is gonna go for the swag strats here, the SpongeBob Swamp. This is an outdated strat to Swamp Cage clip, but it does save about 3 seconds optimally compared to the strats that Tower's doing for swamps. It's basically getting to end the level as SpongeBob with a cruise boost and saving some movement speed. And now they're going to be returning to Squid's Dream to just pick up a really fast spatula here with cruise boosting. Because this is pretty much the best place for menuing to do Squidward's Dream here. And this is another one of those levels like Kids where how quickly you can get the cruise boost is everything, because the entire level's on a cycle. Looks like Tower had a pretty clean one. Jack's gonna have to play a little fast. Ooh, yeah, he's gonna have to slam there, okay. But he made it.
Good stuff out of both of them on that one. That's it's a very quick segment because you get to grab a spatula and a sock, and it usually only takes about 40 to 45 seconds. If you do it optimally, of course.
I'm not sure if we explained what the socks do. As you see, they're at 19 socks right now. So, basically, Patrick explains to you in the hub world early on that he's missing his socks, and if you give him 10 socks, he'll give you a golden spatula for them. So there's 80 socks in the entire game, and in 100% we get all the spatulas from Patrick, but in any percent here, usually with most routes, people only get 20 socks to get 2 pretty fast spatulas from Patrick. Yeah, there's also a lot of preference in this game with your sock route and which socks you're getting throughout the run. Because there's really minimal difference between the socks, but there are some faster ones and some slower ones that some people opt for.
Yeah, it's just another one of those great things you can just route to your own preference.
Ooh, that was a scary trampoline jump from Jack.
Yeah.
So the thing that they're doing with that trampoline is that normally it's supposed to be scripted to send you a certain direction, but since they have a cruise boost and since they're always being pushed forward with a cruise boost, since they have constant speed, that cruise boost momentum actually overrides the direction the trampoline's supposed to send you. So you can't act while you're in the middle of the animation from jumping off the trampoline, but if you set up your angle accordingly before you jump on it, you can actually influence the way you go, and it happens that going on top of the goo tanker to head straight to the end of the level is the fastest way to do things there. So abusing the trampoline is a pretty fast strat there. Looks like Jack's going to be going for Boat Bash, which is a slightly faster way of getting to the top of the graveyard of ships.
There's a few ways you can do that. Tower did the one where you grab the ledge of the little wood plank out there, and then
Ooh,
bash
that's
slam to get up
unfortunate
top.
for Tower.
There's also boat bash, and
Ooh,
you
it
can do
almost
during the
happened to
wall
Jack
jumps.
too.
Yeah, that was close. Oh,
So
okay.
it looks like it did happen.
It does
to Jack.
happen.
So yeah, that cruise boost off that pole has a lot of risk, and like Jack doesn't know the backup strat. If you get the box at the top of the graveyard of ships, you can actually warp down to Squidward instead and just jump in the box to back that up. But Tower didn't open the box because it's suboptimal to do that with the trick he does. So he didn't have the option to do it. He had to do the entire graveyard of ships again. Yeah, as you see, Jack had the box open, so if he knew that backup, he could have just... But they lost like a pretty similar time to that, but Jack had a little bit of trouble doing the backup strat for Boat Bash. Looks like Tower had a pretty solid cannons. Oh, Jack missing the button.
First button.
Doing the 360. So yeah, if you remember earlier on in the run, it looked pretty one-sided in Jack's favor for a while, and then Tower brought it back. So that's kind of just the nature of runs of this game.
Jack's struggling a good bit with cannons there.
Yeah, your consistency with tricks in this game is everything, with how you perform under pressure, either on PV pace or in a race like this.
now we're moving on to one of my favorite tricks in the game. I don't know why it's one of my favorite. I just think it's fun to do movement-wise. Basically by bashing around and doing a bunch of fun movement to get to the top of this ship here, you can actually skip the trigger for the Flying Dutchman fight and just immediately get the spatula afterwards instead of actually having to do the fight.
Similar to Prawn Skip, where the devs kind of just left a trigger in the game to end that fight immediately. And if you've played this game casually, you might not know that they didn't actually destroy the cannons on the robot ship to unlock the warp for the Dutchman boss fight. The game just kind of unlocks the mission warp for it once you get the cutscene from the chest. Now, Tower here went for GCLC, or Goo Cage Lag Clip. It's another one of those lag clips that you clip through the ground to access some objective that you need to access. I don't know if we explained exactly how lag clips work, but it abuses the fact that I mentioned earlier on in the race, where when you have a cruise boost, your downwards momentum doesn't get reset when you land on the ground. So when they lag the game by pausing repeatedly over and over again, the game doesn't really know what to do with SpongeBob's position, and it's trying to like keep up with keeping his location accurate. But when you have a bunch of downwards momentum, you can trick the game into thinking that you're like falling through the ground, and it like resets you in a different position when you unpause the game. So it's pretty interesting. It's not really pause buffering in the traditional sense, because the game pauses and unpauses in one frame, and you don't really have like any delay to buffer anything in between pauses. So like the spamming pause isn't really to like set up buffering any frame perfect trick. It's purely to abuse the game lagging when you pause repeatedly.
And here we are, folks, the main event.
Tower is going for fast brain, clipping inside of the robot's brain to hit all these fuses early and skip the entire fight sequence at the end of the game. Some pretty precise platforming and ledge grabs in here. Tower finishing pretty solidly. He was behind like most of the beginning and brought that back.
Since we didn't really explain what was happening, you can actually completely skip the Robo Sponge boss fight. Because you can actually completely just jump up to hit another trigger up there to skip the fight. When he goes to karate chop the platform, if you jump at the right time, it'll just launch you so high and you'll hit the trigger to skip the fight.
Jack going for fast brain, having a little bit of trouble trying to do some swag to close out the run. Yeah, that was definitely a good race and a good comeback from Tower. So Tower's actually going to be participating in the second race we have right after this as well, so it's prepared for 2 categories in a row.
And if you end up watching both of them, you are going to notice that these are 2 very, very different categories.
Exactly. Pretty much every category in this game is different from each other in their own way.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack getting soft locked in the brain. He's gonna have to reload the level.
Hey fellas, poor Jack.
That'll pretty much do it.
Oh no.
Finish it for the fans.
Alright, you know what? For the fans, we're gonna do it.
Do it.
Alright, so good race, guys.
Yeah, I was holding out pretty well, like after I missed Rock Skip, but I just fell apart in Dutchman. GG Tower.
I thought LTCS like carried me for most of the run.
Yeah.
I got it fucking. I'm sorry, my language. First try.
Yeah, you did. Congrats. Yeah, Curtis.
But you did very well as well. So.
Thanks, Tower. Thanks,
Good
Tower.
stuff.
Yeah, Curtis. I was gonna say, Tower and I use like the exact same route. The only difference is that he does LTCS and I do Kids and Lighthouse. That's the only difference.
Oh, okay.
Not a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it puts me behind by like 30 seconds if you add up like how long LTCS takes with like how long Lighthouse and Kids take, but it's like at least consistent.
Yeah, that's always good in a race environment, so I don't blame you at all.
I'm honestly glad we got to showcase LTCS though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that trick is.
I shouldn't have
really
won
good.
that race.
I
I died in Robot Ship, so I had to rewarp to the bungee.
Yeah,
You guys both
did,
I
actually.
ended up doing that right after
missed
you.
You guys both missed the pole boost and had to reload.
Yeah, I was telling myself that I shouldn't do it because I know I was probably gonna lose anyway, so I shouldn't like try and put myself even more behind. So I was just like, and then I was just like, oh no, wait, I actually could still win this, and I was very confused, very confused.
Alright, you guys put up.
I thought I lost
Guys-
the race there.
You guys put on a great show.
Yes.
It was close for a long time.
Yeah, we've always had some pretty like competitive races in the past.
A rematch 2 years in the making.
Oh yeah, can someone pull up the photo? Just kidding, I got it.
Alright, so up next, we're gonna have a race of the same game, but a different category between Tower and Zim.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll
Yep.
get that set
So-
up soon.
We're gonna get that set up real quick, guys.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on QuickFest, SpeedFest. I had a lot of fun doing this run, and good luck to
Pleasure
Tower.
racing you, dude.
Good luck to Zim. Yeah, that was really fun. See you guys.
See ya.
See you, man.